typically what the appraiser is supposed to ask is, what is the average person going to pay? Say they have two exact same houses, and then you've got that one that has that deck on there. How much more is that person going to pay for that deck? Probably a lot of appraisers aren't going to say what I'm about to say. The best appraisal is...
Well, welcome to the Beyond Wealth podcast. Bruce Glenn, you are the man when it comes to appraisals. You also do some flipping, and you've just been in real estate in general in the space for a long time. And so I'm so grateful that you would come and join us and share your insight. We're going to deep dive into appraisals. But briefly, just give me kind of your experience, where you kind of been on this pathway of real estate.
Sure. And thank you for having me. No, I enjoy this stuff. So, I've real estate for a long time. As Matthew will tell you, I'm very old. I mean, he'll be the first to tell you. So, but I bought my first rental property in Denver. I lived in Denver, Colorado, and back in the 80s. And I flipped it with a partner and realized, I like real estate. It was because nobody was doing it. Nobody did it. But
there was no HGTV then, fix or flip.
There was nothing. There was nothing. And then really, what happened was, in the neighborhood I lived in, I saw a guy come in and bought a house in our neighborhood, and redid it and sold it. And I thought, and I saw the prices and everything. I thought that was a pretty good idea. So I got with a realtor up there that was kind of familiar with investments, and so that's kind of how it got me interested in real estate. And then I moved around a little bit. I was in DC for a little bit, and then came down to Birmingham. And so this was early, about 1990, 1991. And I married a woman that was a real estate appraiser, and their family were appraisers, the whole family. So they were like, you need to become an appraiser. So
if you're going to even think about it, right?
Exactly. And so I'm like, okay. So that's when I started and got my license. So it's been just over 30 years, so I've been appraising in and around Birmingham, all over Birmingham. So,
wow.
But I still always had that interest in buying and selling houses too. So after a little bit of being here, I was kind of picked up one here or there and just did it with some friends and just a little bit. But I've been appraising full time for the whole 30 years. I mean, that's been my staple, so.
Now, you probably could have picked better places to appraise from a standpoint of Birmingham, I think, is difficult in a lot of ways because you can literally drive in a slightly different section because there's so many hills and rolls and there's different pockets that are, up and coming and pockets that are really run down and pockets that are affluent and just the lay of the land and the complexity of it. It's not like this cookie cutter out in Arizona where everything's flat, it's all slab, just boom, boom, boom. Obviously, we have developed neighborhoods.
Sure.
But that didn't come until later. So talk me through those, those challenges you see in appraising in Birmingham.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of variety. And, that's one of the things that's kind of helped since I've been in it for so many years. There's not an area in Birmingham I haven't appraised, so which helps because if you're not familiar with the area, it can be difficult. And, after the recession and things just went, it was a mess after 2008-9. The appraisal business, everything slowed up with that, and they were, just really trying to cut our fees, and they were getting people to come in from, and they still do. Some lenders still try to get guys from out of Birmingham to come in and appraise. And it's difficult, and I've gotten calls more than once about, hey, could you look at this appraisal? Because this guy came in from Pell City. He did a house in Mountain Brook, knew nothing about Mountain Brook, and just really undercut it, and doesn't understand that even in Mountain Brook, there's streets that will demand a whole lot more, I mean, it's just, and you just have to know the area. So, but it's just a lot of years. I mean, I've probably done, I do 250, 300 appraisals a year in over 30 years. So I'm 8,000 to 10,000 appraisals, so I've been in a lot of houses, so, but it can vary just, it's like a number of years ago when Greystone was just being developed and I was doing a lot of stuff in Greystone. And this woman, it was her first really nice house, and she was so excited, she had it built, and so I was out there appraising it, and she was like, you have the greatest job, she said, you get to do the beauty. I said, It is. I love the job. I said, but this morning I was in like a $10,000 house in West End that I'm beating on the doors, making sure that nobody's in there before I walk in, So,
Yeah,
it's
swings.
not all, not all Greystone or Mountain Brook properties that I'm looking at,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. But to see the variety, in all the different locations and areas, is there, and we'll dive into more like the variables and how negative, but in a new construction area where maybe you're on the edge of the construction, do you take into account the value of that house because for the next 6 months or a year, they're going to have to deal with that construction, traffic, and all that? Or is that just kind of like that's a temporary situation and you don't appraise for that?
Good question. Usually it's temporary. However, a lot of times it depends on the subdivision, but a lot of builders will discount the first few houses just to get people in, and because they are going to be putting up construction for 6 to 12 months, So sometimes it's already built into the price, as far as, not always, but a lot of times builders want to get things going, want to see people moving in, and so they'll do that. But you can take it into consideration, but usually I don't have to make adjustments for that type of thing.
That's great.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the variables. So there's probably a laundry list of, is it a half bath versus a full bath?
Yeah.
Is there a pool? Is the driveway gravel, or, do you still have a driveway, but it's, gravel versus like cement? Like there's just these nuances to subtleties.
Yeah.
Talk through some of the major ones. And there's one a couple I want to ask for my specific property. This is just really a selfish
no
venture.
problem. I understand.
But some of those variables, like, when you have a comp that, has an extra half bath, what is the number that you subtract or add for a half bath?
Right.
Like, generally speaking, I know we can't. Every property is different. But
exactly. And every neighborhood, what you adjust in Eastlake is what you adjust in Mountain Brook. It's just totally different. But a lot of times depending on the area, a half bath doesn't add maybe $2,500, $5,000, add to that, price of that. But it can be a lot more if you go into Mountain Brook. It can be. It depends on the finishes and all that stuff. So, but that probably the biggest thing though is square footage. I mean, square footage is probably going to be the biggest thing, because when you're pulling comparables, you want to have comparables that are similar in square footage, So, and a lot of times, realtors, that's why I like speaking at real estate offices. It kind of explain to them, because I get realtors that want to send me comps, and I might be, appraising a 1,500 square foot house, and there's houses that are 2,800 square foot in the neighborhood, but they're not comps, They're just, if you've got a 1,500 square foot, 10, 20% difference, 1,800, 1,300, somewhere in there, if you have them there. Now, sometimes there just aren't sales, so you can kind of expand your parameters. But typically, square footage is probably the biggest thing, and then you've got age. In some neighborhoods where they're an older neighborhood where maybe down the block they had a couple acres that sold 10 years ago and they built a new subdivision. Well, those aren't comparable typically to that older houses.
Not even close.
No, exactly. But they might be a block away. So somebody says, "Oh, hey, it's on the street," well, but it's not comparable. So basically, one of the definitions of being comparable is to be so similar it's the same. So if you kind of think like age, square footage, utility, 3-bedroom, 2 baths, 3-bedroom, 2.5 baths, similar. If it's got 3 or 4 bathrooms, you need to narrow those parameters, So those are kind of the big things. And distance. You don't want to, I had back in the recession, all kinds of things, they were lending on all kinds of ridiculous things, and one of the issues. But I had one lender that he had some house in Eastlake that these guys were flipping, and it seemed like they were all selling for like $77,000. It was like the lucky number or something, And so anyhow, he did the loans on them and got questioned when he sold the loans. They came back and said, "You know what? We're not comfortable with these appraisals." And so he sent them to me to sign off on them. Said, "Hey, could you just sign off on them?" And I'm looking at it, and all the comparables they used, these were in Eastlake, and all the comparables they went over to Roebuck. They skipped like a mile's worth of really good comparables that probably were $40,000 or $50,000 comparables. You can't do that. You can't skip over. If there's stuff close, you've got to use it. You just can't. So
what is the basically area you can't go beyond, or generally, like, are you a mile out and anything more than a mile is probably shouldn't use it?
Yeah, depending on, like, if you're in city, like say interstate, the East Lake, the West Side, or wherever. You should be able to find something within a mile, you know. Sometimes maybe it's a total redo that somebody's done. Okay, if to get a total redo, you might go a little bit farther, but you're not going to go more than 2 miles. 2 miles, and lenders are going to want something probably within a mile. Yeah. Now, if you get in the suburbs, typically they'll go 2 miles. But usually you can find stuff within 2 miles. Now, if you get rurally, they'll take 5 miles, or I did one the other day that had like 10 to 12 miles away. But it was out in the rural area, and I explained there were no sales. There were no comparable sales. So and they're okay as long as they're not there and you can explain it. So.
And I've looked at, stuff that's a little more rural, and obviously there's lower supply. I mean, there's, 5 houses instead of 20, because they have acreage and all that. But they also don't seem to move as much, like people in those pockets, or they're passing it on family, or so I feel like there's less sale activity in those pockets too. So comps can be hard just from the activity level. Less inventory and less activity. That's great for a really tough comp.
That's exactly right. And lenders know that too. And as long as you explain it, like sometimes, like, they like 12 months sales within the past 12 months. That's another big thing. Now, when the market's changing, they like to have 1 or 2 in the last 3 months. They want to see what's current. When you get in a rural area, I'll try to get, maybe 2 or 3 comps that are under 12 months, and then maybe I've got a great comp that's 18 months. I put it in there as a 4th comp, and the lender goes, okay, great, thanks. That gives us an idea, because there's fewer sales, and, and it shows the value, but it's 18 months, but that's what's available, so.
Yeah, this is, just as we're talking, I'm like, another question. So this is going to be packed with information, which is great. So you got to make some compromises, right? You got to, they're alike, but they're not quite like.
Right.
What are the ones you're willing to bend on, and other ones where you're less likely to? It sounds like square footage is very essential. But you could maybe move outside a little bit. Date's important. What's the first thing, the first lever you pull to say, I can't find a comp? What am I going to tweak in my search to hopefully find something?
Right.
And then back into, like, the most important thing that you do not tweak or try not to.
No, that's great. One thing, I'll go a little bit farther out possibly. However, school systems are real important, because you don't want to be like in Crestline Gardens, that's a Birmingham city school, and 2 blocks away is a Mountain Brook, and it sells for twice the, 250,000. You can't. No, you've got to keep schools in mind, So that's an important thing. You can go a little bit farther out. I'll do that. I will go a little bit older. Like, I usually try to find other 6 months. If I can't find, then I go 9 months, 12 months. For the first 3 comps, the lenders don't like you to go over 12 months. They just pretty much say that. So you'd rather go farther away, than do that. So I'll kind of give on that stuff. Condition is one that, you might get in a neighborhood and maybe say yours is totally redone. I'm doing it for somebody just did Matthew's house, and I'm trying to find something that is totally redone. Sometimes I can't find 2 or 3 comps that are totally so I might have to get something that's maybe somewhat updated, and then I make adjustment for condition, and then just do that. Those are kind of things, but I don't want to. Square footage is a big one that I'm just not going to get too far away from. Utility, Now the other thing is, like, if you've got, say, a house on a crawl space, I'm going to try to find at least a couple comps on a slab or a crawl space with no basement. Now, I might use the 3rd comp that has basement that's unfinished. I might use that as a backup if it works. In the other upstairs, square footage is similar. Do that. So you can kind of do that. Ideally, I'd like to find 3 with on crawl space, but sometimes you can't. So
it really comes to the lay of land, because you could, the slope could go, and they're like, let's stick basements on every one except for the one at the top of the hill. That just gets a crawl space.
Yep. That's true. It's true.
All of a sudden, you're like, everything close. Let's talk about basements. So I've heard it said that basements are about 50% of the square footage value, unfinished versus, finished.
Right.
Give me kind of the metric for how do you comp that.
Yeah, and that the 50% typically is if you, say you're adjusting for square footage above grade, and say you're adjusting at $50 a square foot, just to say wherever it is, and then you've got the basement that's got finished, and you have one comparable that has finished basement, and your subject has finished basement. Then you might do $25, $30 a square foot adjustment on that. However, now people say, well, it's worth 50% less. It's not really, because if you look at the sale that has finished basement, there's already built into that price is that finished basement is already in there. So you're getting a lot more value because that price is going to be higher that has that finished basement. You're just getting an adjustment that's not as high comparing finished basement to finished basement. So it's kind of misleading. People think, oh, it's worth half. No, because hopefully you got your comparables that all have finished basement, and that's already got built into the price. The sales price is that finished basement. So if that makes sense.
Yeah. So if you're basically looking for the comp that is as comparable.
Exactly.
Basically.
Exactly.
But if you did not have that, you would make a adjustment
Right.
to, okay, this has a basement, but it's not finished.
Right.
This one does have finished, so
Right.
but it's not the same value as the upper level square footage.
No.
It's just not.
Yeah, it's not. It is not. It is not.
And you could have like a house that's 1,500 square feet, and then another 1,000 square feet down in the basement, and it's not a 2,500 square across the thing.
Exactly.
So,
and people make that mistake, and I won't name a person because we all know him. And he called me about, it was probably 6 years ago. He was doing a house, and it was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath upstairs, and it had a bedroom and a bathroom finished in the basement. And when he bought it, he was pulling comps, and he was kind of new to it, and he was thinking 3-bedroom, 2-baths, and he added the square footage, just like what you're talking about. And then he sold it. I want to say he had it under contract for like 140, 150. It was out in a rural area, and he gets the appraisal back at 120 or 125. And he calls me and he goes, "Bruce, take a look at this. What happened?"
He said, "Looked like good comp to me."
And I'm like, I looked at it and I just, unfortunately, there was plenty of 2-bedroom, 1-bath with finished basements. I guess probably the developer 20 years ago had done those. And so those sales were there. The appraisal was valid, he ended up selling it for about $20,000 less than what he thought, So that's that. You can't just add them and think it's equal to what's above grade. You can't do it.
It is very interesting too, because you have to walk these houses, and you kind of like. I've also been a huge proponent of when I take a listing to market, I have to walk it because there's nuances to a way a house flows that I know that it's going to just do better than other houses, and it's. And sometimes even that's not, as an appraiser, it's not your judgment call, but as a investor, also realtor, like I can say, hey, we may not sell for quote unquote more, but we're going to get off market a lot faster because this just feels great.
Yeah.
And other houses you walk, like I looked at a potential flip the other day, and they had a step up. And it wasn't any minor step up. I mean, it was like almost a foot step up into all the bedrooms. Yeah. And so what had happened was they did an addition. And that whole addition with all these, massive bedrooms, like 3 just huge bedrooms, they had, for whatever reason, built up. And it's just like, yes, someone will be fine with it.
Yeah, right.
But it's just, you can't comp it. Yeah. And so you have to say, like, what is that worth? $10,000, $20,000, $30,000?
Yep.
Is a compromise. Whoever buys this house is going to compromise on this weird step up. Right, it just felt weird.
Yeah.
And some people could care less, but I think the majority will.
Right. No, you're exactly right. And I'll run into something, and if I run into something like that, and it just triggers me and goes, that's not everybody's gonna like. Because I flip houses too, so I'm well aware of too what people like and don't like. And if I see something like that, I might make an adjustment for it. And I'll have, as long as I explain it out and go, this is not typical for the area. This is not, and I feel it could be, and I might take a hit, because it really deserves to take a hit, because not everybody is gonna buy it,
No, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the specifics of my question. So I have a house, my current residence. It is right off a lakeshore, so it's one house in. And so in addition to that, so that's one negative I call. I got a discount, so that's good. It's in Homewood. You got to get a discount, right?
Gosh, yeah.
But in addition to that, so that's one negative. I know I got it for cheaper. I'm going to have to sell it for cheaper. Number 2, it's a split level. So those, in my opinion, I think ranchers are worth more. They just do better. So it's a split level. And then the third would be that because of the split level, there's no master bath or primary bath. Yeah. So it's just kind of a common area bath upstairs and a common area bath downstairs. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just curious, obviously you haven't seen the house, but you know the area. Just rough idea of between those three kind of what I would see as, negatives and why it actually sat on market for a month. And there was other variables. It was needed a paint job, needed, drywall taken down, all those kind of things. But, I know I bought it for a discount and it was what we need to do to get into Homewood. Sure. But on sale, I know I'm going to have to give that discount. Exactly. Yeah. What would you put a rough number on that? And I'm not going to hold you to it.
No. It's worth nothing. I'll give you $100,000 for the house right now. Sight unseen.
He's like, it's probably like, let it go.
No, the being right off Lakeshore is not as bad, honestly. Okay. I don't think, because just being in Homewood, people pay, and honestly, it's like if you go down Broadway, people pay. To me, it just always surprises me, but people pay top dollar on Broadway in a busy street, and people pay a lot on Lakeshore too, even as long as you got good access off of it and all that, which most houses do. So I wouldn't worry as much about being right off Lakeshore. The next thing that the split level, yes, that's not, I agree, probably one, ranch would be more desirable. But there again, that doesn't bother me as much. Now, the bathroom situation, now you say it doesn't have a master bath?
It does. There's 3 bedrooms upstairs and a bathroom.
And one bathroom.
But it is for everyone.
Yeah, right.
There's no primary, bathroom.
To me, if it was me, I would try to figure out how to either make it a 2-2 with a nice master suite or get a bathroom in there. I think that would help you a lot, because I think that's going to be the biggest sticking point is people are going to want a master with a master bath, and I've done this, and Matthew's, he'll call me and go, hey, should I turn this into a 2-2? And I'm like, yeah, I would rather have a 2-2 than a 3-1 that is not what people, and especially if you got basement too, so that's kind of, so it's hard to give you a dollar amount, but that's what my biggest concern would be the bathroom situation, the master. Yeah.
And I think it's why it stayed on market. Honestly, and I saw the opportunity and, went in there, fixed it up myself because we did not have a lot of cash at the time. And it worked out, but I know it's one of those things where I'm going to have to solve down the road. We make it work, but but that's really helpful. Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit about the appraisal coming in close to near the asking price. Yeah. This is we're just firing into hot topics. So I recently had a property that I feel like we locked up for a really good deal, especially in this market. And appraisal came in exactly at ask. Yeah. And my understanding is that it's not the appraiser's job to evaluate it too far above or below to kind of, if everybody's crazy, your job is to say, hey, this house is not worth it. That is your job. Right. But at the end of the day, you're not supposed to blow up a deal saying, this house, you have it under contract for $320, it's really worth $400. Yeah. And then the seller's like, whoa, wait a second. Let's take it back to market. Let's cancel this contract. So talk me through that fine line of finding comps and figuring that out. And
you're pretty right on. When I started, 30 years ago, and to me, I was like, okay, I'm doing an appraisal and just whatever it is, just send in there. And the weirdest thing though, I remember one of the first times I did, like say it was a $300,000 house and I came in at 325, because that's what it really looked comfortable at. And the lender says, I get a call back. This is when we talk to lenders, now we got to go through management companies and all that. But they call me and say, what's up with this? And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, why is it selling so low? And it's a red flag. They think there's something wrong, wait, what's going on? There's something out of the ordinary. And basically, and probably shouldn't say it, but the lender wants to know that their loan is covered, and they would rather, hey, if say the house is 325 selling for, and I've got comps between 300 and 350, I'm going to come in at 325. I'm just going to come because I'm comfortable with that. The lender will be comfortable. They're going to get their money back if they get the house back and sell it. But now sometimes, there'll be some times when I have to come in higher or I have to come in lower. There's just no getting around it. But I try to explain it. Say, hey, there's very limited comps. And I might say, it appears to have sold a little low because it was only on the market for a day, or sold a little high because it was on the market for a day, whatever it might be. But if I explain it, then it's okay. But typically, 9 out of 10, 95 out of 100 are going to be real close to that sales price.
Yeah, and there's a lot of science to it. There's a lot of math involved and stuff, but there's still opinion, and as long as you're coming close to that, and you can quantify it with other comps, I think it's understandable for sure to, say, hey, you have it under market, you have it under contract, 320, it's worth 320. And to a degree, especially a house, I can see it's hard with a house that's been on market for a day. Right. Because there's this feeding frenzy and everybody's locking it up and they're like, we got to go. But a house like, that I think the one we just, put under contract, for example, we looked at it, it went in contract, out of contract, and then we put it under contract. But it was back on market for like a week and a half before we submitted, and we were the first offer to go back. And that's just part of the market slowing stuff. But as an appraiser, I would think you would take into account, like, if that's what the market is telling you, these buyers sometimes they're looking at more houses than you are, and they're telling you it's worth this price. Yeah. It's this desirable, this number,
And probably a lot of appraisers aren't going to say what I'm about to say, but honestly, the best appraisal is what somebody's willing to pay for the house. A knowledgeable buyer. Now I've had people come in from California that jumped on a house, and I'm like, no, guys, this isn't California. You're paying way too much. But a knowledgeable buyer that's been looking at properties and they're willing to pay that, or if I have 2 or 3 offers and they got backup offers, that's what it's worth, and now I can do, as whatever I can do to make it work. If I can, I can't, but that's telling me that that's what it's worth right now, so.
Yeah, that's good. I want to circle back and talk about, I call it compression. You probably call it something else. But it's this idea that basically a 3-2, 3 bedroom, just 2 baths, we'll say it's 1,500 square feet. And a 3 bedroom, 2 bath, that's 2,000 square feet. For the most part, they provide the same living situation to a family, right? Like the 500 square feet does not change the fact that you have a roof over your head. Right. You have 2 places to go to the restroom. You have a kitchen. You have a dining room, right? And so I call it this idea of compression, that when you have like some of these 3-2s that are like 1,200 square feet on the lower end, and people are like, why are they worth almost just as much as the ones that are 18 or 2,000 square feet? I've used this idea of compression because it basically is providing almost the same lifestyle of protection, safety, like I said, a home. And so is there almost like an expansion? Obviously, you got to keep a comp, and that's why you have the percentage of square footage. But if you have something on the really low end and the really high end and those extremes, do you see that kind of loosening of that price per square foot, and it kind of gets a little bit lower on the bigger properties, if that makes sense?
Exactly. I've never called it compression, but I like that. No, that's because
you can take that term.
Okay, I will.
You can take the term. You'll have to license it, and you'll pay me royalties, but you can take it.
But that's good. That's exactly, you described it exactly, because it's functionally giving somebody a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. The family can live in that house or the other house.
They can fight in that house. They
can do everything. All right, maybe they got a nice den with a fireplace in the other one or whatever. But you're exactly right. In the more square footage, typically the price per square foot is going to come down some, And so that's like another thing that, if I can jump onto something else, we'll talk about price per square foot. So many realtors, and this is a one good way of looking at things, go price per square foot. And they'll see this house sold for $200 a square foot, and then everything they figure at $200 a square foot. You can't really do, there's a lot of factors that go into that. It's a general rule of thumb that can kind of, one way to quickly look at it. But when you go to, like you say, a larger house that's got 500 square feet more, it's probably going to sell for less per square foot. It just is, or maybe they're doing $200 a square foot, but one had a basement and one didn't. Well, that's not into the factors, So there's a lot of things. It can be a quick rule of thumb, but don't just, because so many people just go, well, this one sold for $200 a square foot. Mine should sell that, and they listed it at that, but it's larger, and it's not going to sell for what that was. So
yeah, mm-hmm. and it goes back to really trying to find the best comp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
exactly. Not being so subjective. You have to, it's almost like. My understanding is appraisal 201, 301. Like the more advanced, you kind of have to nuance and you have to push and make accommodations. But really, the goal is just find a good comp within 10% or 20% max of square footage.
That is exactly it.
So it's really insightful. And like I said, I think this is going to help a lot of people when they're, especially investors looking, as a realtor, like I love working with investors, helping people out, but I don't have time to comp for you all day. You gotta learn that yourself. Yeah, and exactly. So hopefully this is a helpful.
Yeah, I hope, because I do a lot with investors in every house that I flip. I mean, I don't do a full blown appraisal, but I do an appraisal in 10 minutes of what I pull the comps. And what I do is, if I have not bought so many houses because I didn't know if an appraiser there was certain issues about it that some appraisers might go, no, I'm not gonna bend there. So I do it, I buy something and I go, okay, I know 95% of the appraisers out there can come up with this value that I came up with. And then I'll buy it and I'll consider it, as long as I can make that number work for selling it for. Because I got a lot of people that buy stuff and they'll call me, investors, and say, hey, what do you think? I'm going, I think that ARV is going to be too high. I just don't think some people could do it, but you might run into a lot of appraisers that are going, no, I can't make that. So,
do you find, let's talk about flips a little bit. It's a unique space when I'm comping and stuff, and I probably tend to be too conservative sometimes, but it's probably better for that than the other way. But, when I've talked to some of the more experienced flippers like you, Matthew, some other guys and gals, they push the comp, especially the ones who know what they are doing.
Right.
And there's a lot of people who jump in and maybe do cosmetic, and don't really thoroughly go through the house and really make it new. You know. Right. In those cases, do you find that you're really having to look for comps, or just you're having to find the most quality flips to justify, because they go for the prices. Right. They go for higher prices than you would even ever imagine. They could be the highest sale on that street by 25 grand. Right. Easily. And they had backup offers. Yes. And how do you navigate those premium flips from the people who are well known doing quality work? Yeah,
that's a great question, because I love buying in a neighborhood that Matthew's already been in, because I got great comps, because he pushes it, But it's justified. Yeah, exactly. It's totally justified. It's like Rob Malkin does these beautiful things in Norwood, but you look at his, there's no comparison to some of the others, so that's justified. So when I go into, I'm doing one in Eastlake right now, it's got all new wiring, new heat and air, new roof, new windows. I mean, we're doing everything. So I'm going to get top dollar for it, but I'm looking for something that's totally redone. And as an appraiser, I see this all the time. Guys will say, oh yeah, I've redone this, And, there's a huge difference between renovations and some, And so if you're doing a renovation and you look at the comps, and those comps have new kitchen cabinets, have granite counters, you really need to look at the details. You can't come in and just paint the cabinets and put laminate countertops on and say yours is comparable, because an appraiser is going to go, no, this one has everything and yours is, nice. I'm not saying it's not bad to paint cabinets. I do it, but you can't compare it to a full-blown rehab.
Yeah, so you need to look at a comparable, flip.
Exactly. You have to.
Not all flips are equal.
Right. No, not at all. And it's okay to do, I've done a number of them that I didn't do everything, but I didn't try to get the highest in the neighborhood, you know? I
Yeah.
mean, it's like it was just something simple I could do real quick and bingo, you know? So you got to be aware.
And all flips, like you said, at the end of the day, they don't demand that. The area maybe doesn't demand the flip, the finishes per se, you know? And you're still providing a great home to the next people as long as it's safe, all those things.
Exactly.
You know, I did a flip in East Lake as well. And man, I mean, we were there too long, and I did not make much money on it. But right when we were getting close to sale, you know, I toured basically everything that was in the pocket, right? Yeah. And I was just like, you know, because I was feeling like I was pushing the comp, you know, and we did it nice. Like it was really nice. And, you know, I don't say this in a prideful way. There was just nothing that came even close in quality, in finishes, in, you know, rolling floors. Though I mean, we put like 10 pylons in that house and rebuilt probably 60% of the subfloors. So
yeah, I understand.
We didn't have rolling floors. Now they weren't perfect because we had to make some accommodations, but at the end of the day, like they were pretty good,
solid.
Pretty solid. And so it is kind of interesting that, you know, the quality, people see it, and it goes back to the buyers.
Right.
Buyers have walked all those other properties and they're saying this is the one, and other buyers are saying this is the one, and it gets the premium price. So it just to me it goes back to there's no free lunch.
Exactly. You know, a lot of people want to get into the flipping houses and investing, you know, and that's fine, but they get in, they maybe pay too much for a property, and then they're cutting their rehab, and they're trying to, well, if you do that, you're not going to get the ARV that you thought you were going to, you know, I mean, it's all relative, you know, so you just, when you're talking about being conservative, man, I tell people, be conservative, especially in the beginning. You know, I got burned in the recession. I mean, it was bad. I mean, it was a bloodbath. And so I'm much more conservative, you know. I mean, it's like, I don't want to go through that again, you know. Yeah. I'm too old to start over again. It's like, you know, so I err on being a little more conservative. So
that's it's any, you know, it comes back to, I think every investor has seasons. You know, I'm in a different season than you are in. Partially because of my experience and also partial age and life, you know, and stuff. And so, you also have to assess your risk level, all those kinds of things when doing that. But I want to talk about land a little bit because that's always been something I'm learning about, but still don't fully know how do you comp land? How do you compare, you know, in these rural areas, a house maybe that has, they're both houses on acreage, but one has 10 more acres than the other one, you can compare them, but how do you evaluate that land value and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's, you know, I don't do a lot of, but I mean, I do some. And basically what I'll do is I will try to find, you know, so whatever area it's in, I'll research what land sales are. Acreage, you know, how much, and I might find, you know, because usually in rural areas you can find land sales over the last couple of years. They're out there. People buy land, and you know it might be $15,000 an acre. You find you've got 10 sales, and they're averaging $15,000 an acre. All right, so then I'm basically, and this is you know, it's not really a set rule of thumb, but anywhere from 25 to 50% of the value, you know, usually probably 25 to 30% of the value of, like, say, $15,000, I might make a $5,000 an acre adjustment. So if this house has 10 more acres, I'll add $50,000 for it, you know, something like that. Now, it's all going to depend, you know, what the area is and the differences. You know, you might look at some land and it's perfectly level and it's great buildable and, you know, pasture land, or it's sitting on the side of a hill and it's, you know, utility is not, you might have 10 acres, but you can't do anything with it, you know? So, I mean, you know, so you got to look at all those factors, but usually I start with finding out what cost per acre is going to be in that area and then make some adjustments off of that, you know?
I'm surprised it's so low. Why is that percentage? Because, you know, I'm just curious. Yeah,
basically what the kind of the thought process is, like, say somebody, whether it be land or somebody puts a deck on there, you know, and they spend $10,000 on a deck. Typically what the appraiser is supposed to ask is, what is the average person going to pay? Say they have two exact same houses, and then you've got that one that has that deck on there. How much more is that person going to pay for that deck? and they're not going to pay the $10,000 because some people don't care or whatever. So they're going to go, okay, well, maybe they'll pay maybe the average person will pay $2,500 more. So when you get with land, you've got, hey, some people don't want that extra 10 acres.
They just want the house with 5 acres.
Right. They don't want
but this happens to have an extra 10.
Exactly. I'm not going to give you $15,000 an acre for it. Right. I'm not just buying that to have, one 15-acre plot, with land on it. This is extra for me. So I'm not going to give you the full per acreage price. Now some people might pay more, and then they might be trying to sell some off and do, there's a lot of options, but typically it's only a percentage of whatever the actual value is what your adjustment's going to be.
Well, and I think too, like someone, I go out and talk to someone and say, I want to buy land. That's my intent. Right. 10 acres, 5 acres, whatever it is, I want land.
Right. Right.
And like you said, for some people who are in this area, it's just an afterthought, like a deck or whatever. It's like, as long as I've got some land, I'm happy.
Right.
And so that extra 10 acre just could not be valuable, which is interesting to think you could have a buyer come along where that extra 10 acres is super valuable.
Yes.
And they bid it up.
Right. And that's true. That is exactly, it's like kind of like pools, I did.
Controversy of pools. We could do a whole episode on those, right?
But I did 10 years ago, I did one in Vestavia, and the guy was refinancing a house, and he put this beautiful pool in, a little pool house changing, and probably, and this is 15 years ago, probably spent $150,000. It was a lot. It was a lot. Yeah. I think I made a $20,000 adjustment, and he had a heart attack. It's like, and that's like I tell people, look, if you want a pool and you're going to enjoy it in the family, then do it. Do it for your enjoyment, but don't do it to get money back out, because there are people that when you sell that house are not going to look at your house because they don't want a pool. They don't want the upkeep. They don't want anything to do with it. So yes, it will get more, but it's not going to get you $100,000 more.
They can see it as a negative.
Yeah, there are. Exactly. There are people
They're like, that just looks like a headache to me, but I like the location.
Right.
And we'll deal with it.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
That's crazy.
So, but that's kind of with everything. Not everybody wants everything, so it's just going to be and like when we do make a adjustment for square footage, it might be where you say, oh, things are selling for $200 a square foot. Well, we're only making adjustments for $50, $75 a square foot difference, because that's only 300 square foot more. So they're not paying $200. They're not going to pay $60,000 for that. It's just going to be a percentage of that. So
yeah. No, that's super helpful, and it goes back to that compression and all.
Right.
Different things. What is it providing? So with that brings up a great topic. What are some of the highest return on investment upgrades, and what are some of the lowest? I'm assuming pool might be one of the lowest.
Pool's one of the low ones. Yeah, definitely.
So just kind of those general upgrade: kitchens, bathrooms, pools, saunas. What's that gamut of those two things?
Updating a kitchen and bathrooms are still really, it's like realtors always talk about kitchen, and it still is true. If you can do them, you don't have to go and spend $100,000 on kitchen. I do it in Mount Brook, and I see people spend more than that. But you can upgrade and do nice kitchens, and you probably get your money back. That kitchens and bathrooms, or the situation where you're talking about where you have one bathroom up, if you can figure out how to get another bathroom, that can make a huge difference. If you look at, like, say, Homewood, for instance, and your house is technically a 3-bedroom, 1-bath. Even if it has a bathroom in the basement, it's looked at as a 3-bedroom, 1-bath with finished basement. Now, people will look at it and they like that bathroom in the basement, but an appraiser is going to try to find another 3-bedroom, 1-bath in the basement. If you add that second bath in Homewood, it can change the whole, it can add so much value, because people will pay so much more for a second bath upstairs. So, it's, that's some of the big stuff that you're really going to get back. I usually tell people don't do too much, because it's hard to get your money back on stuff. Now, if it's in rough shape and it just needs painting, some flooring, that's well worth it, because if it's rough like that, you're going to get hit. People are going to go, I'm going to, say if it needs $20,000, I'm going to knock off $40,000 and make a less $50,000 left offer, so that can be, if you don't spend too much, but, there's just not a lot that you get in money back. I wouldn't add a really nice deck system out there unless your deck is really rough, that type of thing. And okay, then maybe
I've already got people out there putting an extra $5,000 to make it a little bigger and a little nicer might be worth it. Yeah. I think about like a screened-in porch is one of those things that I eventually want. Like I had some friends they had this huge screened-in porch with this huge fan and just in Alabama like we have really wonderful falls and springs, but not so much with the bugs. So if you can eliminate those guys, it's really beautiful weather. But I think about it and I'm like, that would be for me.
Yeah.
For the time I'm in that house, I would enjoy this.
Right.
So I'm going to spend the money and just be okay with.
Yes.
Someone else might be like, this is nice. Let's put an offer on this one over another house.
Right.
Just because the screen porch, probably not going to happen.
Yeah. No, you're right. And that's what I tell people all the time. If you're going to enjoy, the house I just bought in Homewood has this, it's 20 something foot by 14. It's huge screen with a vaulted ceiling. It's my favorite part of the house. It really is nice. But it cost the guy. I think he said when he did it was $40,000 when he did it. And this is years ago.
Yeah.
And it was a gentleman. He bought the house. He bought the house for $30,000. And he was telling my father-in-law. He said, "I put $40,000 in the deck, and I paid the house $30,000." So
how times have changed.
I know it.
Must have bought it a while ago for $30,000.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was 1962 or something. So, but that. But what you say, though, is if people are looking at houses and they see that, I wouldn't spend all that money to do that, but unless you're going to enjoy it. But it will be when you're selling, that's going to be a nice thing that people are going to look at and go, you know what? Hey, for a little bit more, I can have this, and this is, nice.
Yeah.
So, but it's hard to say, put really a dollar amount on it, but it'll be, your house will sell quicker. It'll sell in for a little bit more, having those features.
Yeah. Let's talk through flipping a little bit. You have that experience as an appraiser and a flipper. Mm-hmm. What have you found finish-wise where you say the buck stops here?
Yeah.
So a good example would be the deck is shot, so it needs a new deck.
Right.
But we're not going to rebuild a 40-foot deck. We're going to just rebuild a minimal
12 by 12.
12 by 12.
Exactly.
Okay, so talk me through some of those things. You're renovating the kitchen. Yeah. You're going to put in mid-grade to low-end thing, but stone in certain pockets, all that.
Yeah.
What are some of those things where you just say, we're just going to tear out this carport versus like try to rehab it type of situations, I guess, or stories?
Yeah. The first thing I look at is I look at what's sold in the neighborhood, and I look at the finishes in the neighborhood and see but the nicest. I look for the nicest. And I want to be... If I'm not the nicest house in the neighborhood, I'm right there, the top 1, 2, or 3. That's what I shoot for because I want top dollar for it. And I will do stuff like I pretty much put granite in just about everything. Even East Lake, I just do it. You can get a basic granite for not that much more than, laminate countertops. And people go, the wow factor, they come in and they see the granite and the ceramic backsplash. It doesn't cost that much more. I'll do that. I'll do little things like soft closed doors on my cabinets. I like to put those in. The hinges are a few bucks extra, but people notice, that kind of stuff, So I do some of those little extras, or even when I've got a cabinet guy it's a medium grade cabinet that I use with him, but I'll throw in a couple glass doors. I'll throw in a couple little features that people notice when they're out looking at half a dozen houses and they go, oh, look at what this one has, So it doesn't cost that much more. That's what I do. I kind of look for those things, but it really depends on what neighborhoods I'm in. It makes a big difference. Like, I did one up in Vestavia a couple years back, and it was beautiful, the view and Shades Crest. It's one of my favorite houses. But we did stuff. We knocked out it had a little 4-foot window that had a view, but the trees were all grown. I spent thousands cutting all the trees down so you could see the view. I took out this window. I put an 8-foot accordion type window. Wow. I put a front door glass so you could stand at the front door and you could see the view from standing outside the front door. But I knew what I wanted, but but it was, you know, $600,000-$700,000 house, you know, that demanded those kind of extras.
Some kind of wow factor.
Yeah, I needed the wows, you know. I mean, I did stuff like I didn't want to put a vent down from the ceiling, so downdraft stoves are ridiculously expensive, you know. And so, but I didn't want anything to obscure the view to see. That's what people see. So, you know, I do little things like that. That's one that I love doing those, but I don't love doing those. There's so much work and you know,
It takes a little extra time.
It's a lot of time. And then I don't have the money to lose or not make money when I spend a year on something, you know. So, money. I kind of stick to more, you know.
But even that finish when you're talking about like adding glass to a few you know, cabinets,
right?
It's a very like universal upgrade, you know, like and not to knock someone who has done this. We all know flippers who have put in specific like wallpaper, and it can add a pop. It can make it definitely set apart from other flips. Don't get me wrong, but you're also niching down your buyer. To a degree with that wallpaper choice. They could not like green or they could not like floral pattern or whatever it is. Right. Versus like the upgrades you're talking about, like no one's going to be like, I like my doors to close hard. Right. I don't like soft close like cabinet doors. Like that's universally an upgrade that everyone that walks through that house is going to value.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, because a lot of my stuff is kind of bland, you know. I mean, as far as because you've got to be appealing to the majority of buyers, you know. I mean, it's like it might not be exactly what I would have done, but you got to look at what the majority of people are looking for. And so, you know, I'm like, you know, I get paint. My house is white like Matthew. You know, it's like I call Matthew, what color are you using?
Yeah,
you know,
it
so
works,
it's like,
man.
But it does, you know. And then people can branch out and do whatever, you know. I'll say if I'm getting I've had a couple unique houses over in the Roebuck Springs area, you know, that I could kind of get a little creative and do some funky things, you know. Yeah. But that was because I was in a really funky little area, and then I branched out a little bit. So
and sometimes that helps, you know, in the up and coming areas or areas that have a little more. You do kind of have to play a little bit to the crowd. Exactly. And I've done a little bit, but I still kept it relatively safe to be as most universally. And I'm sure you kind of do the same. So all right, I'm going to circle back on appraisals. Right. Man, the flipping's great, and the inside I think is really helpful because as you comp and as you figure out you know, like think through as a flipper, you really do need to know your comps. So this is like to me, this is like if you don't watch this episode, then I don't know what you're doing. So, but I want to talk about desktop appraisals versus in person. I've had portfolios where they've desktop appraised certain properties, and then they say we got to do in persons for others. Right. When did that come into the industry? How accurate have you found them to be? When are they being used and when are they not helpful? Yeah. Talk me through that. I mean, it's kind of your competition, right? Yeah. Those are the good questions because desktops have been around for a long time. They've been around for a long time. And it's some lenders won't use them at all and some lenders will, you know, but I don't do desktop appraisals. I prefer to do a full-blown appraisal. If my name's got to go on it, you do a desktop appraisal, your name's going on that, and you're not doing the detailed analysis and everything that you're doing with a full-blown appraisal. Yeah. And the thing is, they can be pretty accurate. However, they can be off too. And I had some investors I know that were buying portfolios, you know, and so they bought, I think, 20, 25 houses in a portfolio. And so they did a bunch of desktop for them. And so then they were selling off a few here and there. And so they got me to do an appraisal on them. And it didn't come in near what the desktop was. Yeah. And so we had a Zoom call with about 8 people, you know, the investors, but they were great because they really wanted to understand why was this so different. And the desktop didn't take into consideration a lot of stuff. And I did. And I said, you know, I wouldn't, if I was buying a portfolio, I would be getting full-blown appraisals, you know. I mean, I just think they can be okay, but they can be off too, you know. Yeah. So that's just experience. And like I say, I just don't do that many of them, so I'm not real familiar. I haven't done them. Well, I mean, I maybe did a couple,
20 years ago, so I don't even know what they do now. So
yeah, I'm assuming that there's almost, my understanding is desktops are basically, they go into some software, they pull comps, and I don't even know if a official appraiser gives a sign off on it. It may all be software. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I just know that they're a lot cheaper.
Yeah. Oh, they're definitely a lot cheaper, but they're based on, they're not going and seeing the inside of the property. I mean, and it's like I tell people, I buy a house for $100,000 and I sell it 6 months later for $250,000. I didn't add any square footage. I didn't change any utility. It was the condition. That's all that made the difference. So it can be huge.
Yeah, it's significant.
Yeah.
I think too, my one deal that I did do a lot of desktops was I was buying them so undervalue. I got a really killer deal. Yeah. And I did my own appraisal or comping.
Sure.
And I'm very familiar with the space, very familiar with the income, all these kinds of things. And I think partially the deal was so good that they're like, of course, these are going to appraise. We're good. So.
That's a good point, though. That's one reason why people do. If they know that the asset, there's no issue at all. Yeah. It's either the asset, you're getting a great deal, or the borrower is so strong, they don't really care. They got to have something in their file, then they might be. But if you're really counting on that desktop for an actual value, then I'd be a little nervous.
Yeah, if you're pushing, if you're really pushing it. So, challenging appraisals. Talk with me about challenging appraisals. And, have you ever had somebody question it? What's that process look like? If I get appraisal that I don't agree with,
right?
How do I, bring it up to the bank? Can it get challenged? How often do those get overturned? Just that whole space.
Yeah. No.
How does that all work?
That's good. I've had very few challenges.
You're so good.
Well, I didn't want to say it, but
Is it like like a baseball player? There's like an appraiser evaluation of like a 0.01%. And they're like, Bruce is up there,
Well, I don't know about that, but anyhow, no, I have been challenged, but typically, the couple that I can remember that I got challenged, they didn't give me any better data, and I'm open to making a change. I've dealt with a number of appraisals that they're difficult to make changes, so, but if somebody gives me better data that I missed for some reason, and I have, I had one a year or two ago that for some reason I did my search and this comp didn't come up, and they came back and asked me, why did you not use this one? And it didn't come up in search, So I'm more than happy to put it in and use it. It just strengthened it. But if you get one though that you feel is not good, or the biggest thing is you've got to have better data, So if you look at the comps that the appraiser used, and you have comps like we've been talking about that maybe are closer, newer, more similar in square footage or whatever it might be, then you can present those. Then you can go to, usually, you got to go through the realtor to the lender, whatever. But you can pass that data along, and then the appraiser will look at it and review it and see if they find something different. Now, typically, it's hard to come up with more data because the appraiser have all the comps pretty much, So
you can't just say, "Hey, I think you're wrong."
Yeah, you got to come up.
You got to actually have something different that they didn't see, or hey, would you look at this comp? And
Exactly.
That appraiser may say, "I did look at that comp.
Right.
That was the data I had too."
Exactly. And you're exactly right. Now, where I find that I was selling a flip recently, and I had to dispute an appraisal. They came in low, and I was like, okay, wait a minute now,
Little did they know they were dealing with a fellow appraiser.
So I was like, but the issue we came up with was the condition. Like I redid everything. I mean, I had new roof, heating, everything, and so they did not. They were comparing it to so-called renovated homes, but they weren't renovated like mine. And I said, wait, our condition is not the same. I need an adjustment on that. We went round and round and round, and finally they made the adjustment. It was difficult, honestly. And there are some appraisers that they feel like they've made up their mind, and I don't see any other data being good. So you got to have something a reason and so condition is one. If you think the adjustments weren't sufficient for yours is more updated or whatever it might be, that's probably the big one, because they're going to get the square footage, they're going to have the sales in the neighborhood, that type of thing. So, or if you find out, I've had them where a house sold low for a certain reason, and I've called the realtor and say, hey, why did this sell for this? It just doesn't seem. It was desperate. The guy had to sell. He was, okay,
like a family situation,
exactly,
or whatever.
Exactly.
I've gotten those as a realtor. I've gotten calls from appraiser, and hey, explain what was with the square footage, or what was their basement, or just they wanted clarity.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And if it was a distressed sale, then you can go back and tell the appraiser, say, listen, you can't use this comp. This guy sold it because his family, whatever the condition. I talked to the realtor, and so you can get something thrown out. So that's something to look at. Yeah.
That is helpful to kind of, if you really, especially if you're trying to, you're flipping, you're trying to push the comps,
right,
and then it comes back. Sounds like for you it did.
Yeah.
So, talk through just the basics. I know that there is a separation of the lender, like you said, and I can't call up the appraiser and chew them out. Yeah. Because it kind of, you're, as an appraiser, you're supposed to be kind of like a third party, independent voice. You don't even work with the appraiser. You get hired. Yeah. Is there a pool of, like, when a lender asks for an appraisal, do they just put it out into the job space and gets bid on by companies? And how's the back end of all of that separation and legality work?
It's different with different management companies. Basically, a lender will go through a management company. They'll say, okay, I want to order this appraisal. And then that management company, it depends. Some will do it on a rotation basis. So if there's 5 of us, 8 of us in with that management company, then boom, boom, boom. This next does a rotation. Some will. Now, I prefer the rotation, but some will bid it out there and go, hey, we've got this available. What's your turn time? What's your fee for it? And I don't personally like that, because usually there's an appraiser out there that's slow and he'll do it for cheaper, and so I'll put just my regular price, and a lot of times I just don't get the work, but so everybody's kind of different, but that's who I deal with, is with the management company. That's who I turn the appraisal into, and then they review it and they send it back to the lender, and that's how it goes. And then if there's an issue, then the lender, will come back to the management company, and they come back to me and say, hey, would you correct this or change this or whatever, or there's a dispute. But so that, that all happened after the recession. Because we used to just deal with the banks and the lenders directly, and we would call. Really? Oh, yeah.
Okay. So that was the shift in some of the rules.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. They thought it was too close.
Too collusive.
Yeah, and honestly, there were issues. But it was really, if they would have just enforced the people that were abusing it, it would be fine. But they went full circle.
The bad apples kind of made it a policy change.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is interesting, because that is my basic understanding. You're independent. You can't just. I can't reach out to appraiser. It is interesting, though. Some reach out to me to get access to the property or anything like that. And but for the most part, it's supposed to be not a lot of communication to try to influence the amount. Right.
No, exactly. But honestly, though, I don't mind, because realtors, I have to get in touch with the realtors to get in the property. I do all that, and I will tell flippers that what I do is I give the appraiser a long list of what I've done. I want them to know, if they throw it out, I don't care. That's fine, but they have it, so they see all the renovations I've done. And I don't give them a dollar amount. I never say I spent X amount of dollars.
Because it would be $3 million every time. I'd like $3 million for this property. I'll really blow it out.
But I don't. I like them to know, hey, we've done a lot of work. Now, in years past, I've had lenders say, well, what did you spend on it? I said, that's none of your business. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It's what it's worth now that I've redone it, you know? So I'll give them all those details and say, hey, and I'll throw in some comps, too. I'll say, and what I usually do is I'll email it to my realtor and say, hey, could you pass this along to the appraiser? And then I know that they're going to see those comps, that they see them too, but I like them to know this is what I'm thinking. You know, this is total redo. This is why I'm thinking it's this. You know,
So this is a great segue into what I do for appraisals. And I'm going to tell you my process.
Yeah.
I think it is relatively good, but I'm curious your feedback on what things may be helpful that I think are helpful or not helpful and all that. So I do a similar thing. I do a roughly about 10 to 15 page doc for appraisals. And so it includes basically the property, you know, photo at top, information, basic specs, all the square footage, everything that I know about the property, parcel, all that kind of stuff, just to make it easy access for potential information they would want. My goal, the overall thing is I'm going to try to be the one who makes your job the easiest.
Yep.
And so that's you know, page. Then I do basically a rough layout of photos of the property. So in case they maybe I'll say this, and don't take it personally. Appraisers aren't the best photographers. They're flying through the picture and they're just snapping photos versus like, you know, I have a photography background.
Yeah, right.
You know, and also, you know, listing, you know, people shoot. And so I like to present and remind them of how good it looked in the photos of the flip or whatever. So that would be number 2. And then I do before pictures. So I do a basic rundown of, you know, not crazy. These are 1-pagers of photos. You know, I don't want them to have to sift through a ton, but I say this is what it looked like before. This is how rough it was. This is how it looks like now. See the difference.
Right.
And then I will do basically a laundry list of everything that I have done to that property to add value.
Right.
Just, you know, of significance. I'm not going to say, hey, there's a base plate here and I put a screw in. That's just not worth it. But HVAC and roof and all that. So laundry list of that. And then from there, I basically, I do what you do is I do suggested comps. And I say suggested very crucially because I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job. I'm just trying to show you what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And so I come with that whole thing, show up to the property early, open up all the windows, make sure the property's like full. This is if I'm really wanting the comp to be good. You know, open up all the windows, turn on all the lights, and I greet them, give them a big smile, shake their hands, hand them the thing, and then I'll say, hey, I'm going to head out, but just thought, you know, thanks so much for taking care of this.
No, that's great.
So what am I doing good in that scenario? What am I overstepping? You know, give me some feedback.
No, I think it's great. Now, I've never done appraisal where somebody's done all that. I mean, honestly, you know,
you haven't been on one of my
I know I haven't appraised any of your houses. So, no, I like all of it. Now, some appraisers, I would tend to go overkill like you're doing, honestly, rather than less. Some appraisers will probably never look at it, never even open it, to be honest with you. You know, who cares? You know, because a lot will. And to me, I would be impressed. Honestly, I would be, okay, this guy is serious about what he's doing. You know, he's got all this data. I like people to give me comparable. Some appraisers like, no, you don't. I don't
Let me do my job.
Exactly.
You do your job.
No, I know, but most guys or gals aren't. They're open, you know, to that, and so I think that's good. You know, now I don't meet the appraiser at my houses. But I know a couple guys that do. They always meet them, you know, and I don't think that's good or bad, but I think it's good that you leave, all right, because I have had appraisers, follow me around all day, you know, and they, you know, you don't want to be a bother to them, but doing what you're doing, I think is great, you know, and just, you know, and just say, hey, if there's anything else you need, but that you've given them everything, you know. So,
reach out if you need. I do, you know, I haven't put contact info. Like I said, I think there's a little bit of the separation of those two, but it's like, hey, if you need more information or whatever, my realtor or whatever can help. But
no, that's
and
good.
it has helped, you know. I think for the most part I get, and you know what's interesting is I actually had a line of credit on one of my properties put on, so you had to get a new appraisal every time you do that. And I just did not have time to get over there and do the whole shebang. I think I still prepped a doc and I gave it to him. But it came in like, you know, 10 below where I wanted it to be. So where I thought it should be, not even want it to be, where I feel like the value was there. Fine. But it still worked out.
Yeah. But I think 9 out of 10 will appreciate what you're doing. I mean,
it'll
honestly,
help some.
It will definitely help some. I
Yeah.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like saying, I don't know if you put money. I don't ever put dollar amounts in there. Now,
Yeah.
I just
But if you slide a 20 in the actual package, that really
that works the best.
a couple 20s.
I was gonna say it's got to be more than 20.
Like I didn't even buy lunch these days, right?
I know it.
Yeah, and to a degree too, I think it comes back to just who I am, and I want people to, when they interact with me and my name and all that kind of stuff, they want to have a good experience in the space of real estate, and I'm sure you're the same.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And I love the fact that you have the appraisal side for kind of consistent flow coming in of income and just from a personal standpoint, but then you also have these spikes of flips and to a degree a way of flexing some of your creativity and some kind of your we all love real estate for a reason. It's not all about dollars and cents.
Exactly.
Flipping is really fun in the sense of seeing the before and afters. That's why there's HGTV and it's so popular, And so it's cool that you found this profession of where you can kind of play both sides and play in both of those areas. It's really awesome.
It's good. It really. I mean, the appraisal business always helps me with my flips. It's always they're just complimenting. I mean, like you say, I love it's not instant gratification, but it's pretty close. I mean, you can in a few months, and people, the neighbors love you. I mean, I've been hugged by more neighbors. It's like I've looked at this house for 10 years. And people just it's good. I enjoy it. I enjoy it. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah. Well, this has been so insightful, super deep. I mean, I think the amount of if you listen to this episode, you would know how to comp. Basically,
very good. Well, good. I hope so.
I think that's the goal. You have a book that which so graciously brought me, so I'm going to be reading this. But first flip. So this is just lessons that you've learned through the course.
I wrote that
of
a couple years ago.
Stuff.
Yeah.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah, it was just something.
Well, if people want to get a hold of you, maybe ask for a second opinion, get appraisal on some of their personal properties, all that kind of stuff. Because you can do that. Like, a banker doesn't necessarily have to hire you. You can be hired as an independent contractor to get a valuation for property.
I do that all the time. Yeah.
How do people get a hold of you to work with you?
Probably it's Glenn Appraisals.
I thought it was Glenn is awesome, but we'll go ahead with Glenn Appraisals.
That's the other one.
That's the other.
It's like, but Glenn Appraisals at Gmail, or the number is 205-369-5662, and they can call and text me. Get together because I'm more than happy. And I measure houses too for a lot of realtors. Or Matthew, he just called me about 2 today. So if if they've got questions about square footage, because sometimes maybe they've had additions or finished basements and they don't know, and I'm more than happy to go out and measure too. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I always say that time is our most valuable asset, even in the space where we're able to make money. And for you to take the time to really deep dive on appraisals, we haven't had this on this channel yet. I think this is one of those content pieces that will provide value for years to come.
Good. I hope so.
And so I'm just so grateful for you to take the time and hang out on Beyond Wealth. So.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. All right.
You have a great week.
You too. Thanks. All right.
Bye.